In my family, love was a competition and I was born losing. It wasn't something loud or obvious, not the kind of thing you could point to and cry foul. It was a quiet, constant pressure like the weight of the air before a storm. The unspoken rule was simple. My younger sister Stella was the sun. And I, Clara, was just a planet caught in her orbit, meant only to reflect her light. Everyone remembers Stella's first-place trophy at the state science fair. A towering monument of gold plastic that still sits on our parents' mantelpiece. But no one, not even my mother, remembers the Chopin piece I played at my final piano recital that very same week. When I later showed her the program with my name on it, she simply smiled that placid, distant smile of hers and said, "Oh, that's a nice hobby, dear. But what Stella is doing, that's building a future." It wasn't just that she forgot. She had categorized my passion as insignificant. I learned to live with it. I learned to swallow my small victories so they wouldn't taste bitter next to her grand triumphs. But the quiet pressure sometimes erupted. I'll never forget my own 16th birthday party. In front of all my friends, as I was about to blow out the candles, my mother walked over, physically adjusted my shoulders and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear, "Stand up straight, Clara. Why can't you carry yourself with the same pride as Stella?" The birthday cake suddenly tasted like ash. So I learned to become a ghost in my own home, to move through the rooms without making a sound, to expect nothing so I couldn't be disappointed. I built a life for myself in the quiet spaces, in the world of data and logic where things made sense. And in that quiet world I met Ben. He was an architect, a man who built things that were solid and true. And he saw me. Not the shadow of Stella, not the other daughter. Just me. And the funniest thing? The first time he met my radiant, perfect sister, he later told me something that shocked me. He said, "Behind all that shine, I think she's terribly lonely." He saw a crack in the sun that even I had never noticed. He loved me for my quiet strength, for my sharp mind, and for the heart I had guarded so carefully. And then, after 3 wonderful peaceful years, I did something I was never supposed to do. I found my own happiness first. Ben proposed. It was simple, perfect, and just for us. When I told my family, I wasn't naive enough to expect fireworks. But I didn't expect the frost. The announcement wasn't met with cheers or hugs. It was met with a silence so heavy, so profound, it felt like I had just announced a death in the family. My father just cleared his throat and stared at his plate. My mother's smile was a tight, brittle thing. And her first words to me, her newly engaged daughter, weren't congratulations. Her very first question was, "Does Stella know yet?" Planning a wedding should be a joyful chaos of choices and shared excitement. For me, it was an exercise in solitude. Each decision, from the floral arrangements to the font on the place cards, was made in a quiet echo chamber. I'd call my mother, Eleanor, trying to spark some interest. I'd ask her opinion on color palettes, on cake flavors, on the very soul of the day I was trying to build. Her responses were always brief, distracted, and ended with a sigh, as if my wedding was just another item on an already overwhelming to-do list. But the real twist of the knife came when I accidentally saw her iPad was open. She did have wedding Pinterest boards. Hundreds, maybe thousands of pins saved over the years. Intricate lace gowns, towering floral arches, fairy tale venues. All meticulously curated for Stella's hypothetical, non-existent wedding. My very real wedding, it seemed, wasn't worthy of a single pin. My future mother-in-law, Margaret, was my saving grace. She stepped into the void my own mother left, her warmth a stark contrast to Eleanor's chill. Every bride dreams of the moment she finds the dress, the moment her mother tears up and says she's beautiful. I found mine on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't what I expected. A simple A-line gown of ivory silk that made me feel like myself. Margaret cried. She held my hands and told me Ben wouldn't be able to breathe when he saw me. That evening, buzzing with a rare flicker of hope, I sent a photo to my mother. Her reply came 3 hours later via text. A single, clinical sentence. "It's a practical choice for your figure, Clara. Not beautiful. Not stunning. Practical." It was the verbal equivalent of a pat on the head, a sterile approval for a sensible purchase, not a celebration of her daughter as a bride. We sent out the invitations, both digital and physical, with the kind of meticulous care only a data analyst can provide. I tracked every open receipt on the emails. I paid extra for delivery confirmation on the paper invitation sent to their 30-year-long address. There was no room for error. Weeks ticked by. The RSVPs flowed in, but one was conspicuously missing. I called. I texted. The response, when it finally came from my father, was a masterpiece of non-commitment. It wasn't a no. It was a "we're swamped with a big project, honey, we're trying our best to make it work." It was a non-answer designed to hold you hostage with a sliver of hope, just enough to stop you from asking again. But a wedding day has its own momentum. It arrives whether you're ready or not. And for a while it was perfect. The Texas sun was warm, the garden smelled of roses, and Ben, the way he looked at me made me forget every slight, every cold shoulder. As I stood opposite him at the altar, listening to the vows he wrote for me, words about my strength, my quiet humor, my soul, for a few precious minutes, the rest of the world and all its empty seats simply faded away. But reality has a sharp edge. During the ceremony, my eyes kept betraying me, drifting to the front row on my side. It was a gaping wound in the fabric of the day. 2 empty chairs, perfectly arranged, not just vacant but screaming their absence. They were a statement, a final public declaration of my place in the family hierarchy. Later, at the reception, an elderly aunt patted my hand, her face a mask of sympathy. What a terrible shame Eleanor and Richard are stuck on that last-minute business trip to Dubai. They must be heartbroken to miss this. I just smiled and nodded. A business trip. So that was the story. The lie was already in motion, spreading through the room like a subtle perfume. And then came the part of the evening I had been dreading more than anything. The clinking of glasses subsided, and the DJ's smooth voice filled the room. And now it's time for a very special moment, folks. Our beautiful bride will now share a dance with her father. The lights dimmed, a soft Ed Sheeran melody began to play, and fathers across the room led their daughters to the floor. And I stood frozen by my table, a bride in a white dress under a spotlight of pity, watching them, feeling 100 pairs of eyes on me, wondering, whispering. A bride without a father to dance with. The seconds stretched into an eternity of humiliation. And then a hand gently touched my arm. It was Arthur, Ben's father. He looked at me, his eyes holding no pity, only a deep paternal kindness I craved. He leaned in and said softly, "The honor would be all mine, Clara. May I have this dance?" And as he led me onto the floor, I didn't feel like a daughter whose father had abandoned her. For 3 precious minutes, I just felt like a daughter. A honeymoon is supposed to be a seamless bubble of bliss, a soft landing into a new life. Ours was. For 2 weeks in the warm Hawaiian sun, Ben and I lived in that bubble. But every bubble, no matter how beautiful, is destined to pop. The moment our plane touched down in Austin, the weight of unresolved reality came crashing back in. I knew I couldn't move forward without a final answer. I needed to hear it from them to understand their reasons, still clinging to a microscopic sliver of hope that this was all just a colossal, tragic misunderstanding. So I made the call. My hands were trembling as I dialed, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My father answered, then quickly passed the phone to my mother, the family's designated queen of emotional warfare. I asked her. My voice was small, barely a whisper. Why? And instead of an answer, instead of an apology, I was met with a tidal wave of manufactured grief. My mother's voice, thick with theatrical sorrow, accused me of being careless, of heartlessly excluding them from the most important day of their daughter's life. "We never got an invitation, Clara," she wept into the phone, her sobs perfectly timed. "We waited and waited by the mailbox. How could you do that to us? After everything we've ever done for you?" The accusation was so audacious, so completely inverted from reality, that it left me breathless. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. For a fleeting, insane moment, I actually believed her. The power of her conviction was that strong. Had I made a mistake? In my wedding planning haze, did I somehow impossibly forget to invite my own parents? My world tilted on its axis. I mumbled a horrified apology and hung up, my mind reeling. The daughter who had craved their love her entire life died in that phone call. And the analyst who demanded the truth was born. I walked like a zombie to my office. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up my wedding files, my email server logs, my postal service tracking dashboard. And there it was. The truth in cold, hard, undeniable data. Invitation email sent. October 12th. Opened by eleanor.richard@gmail.com. October 12th, 3:15 p.m. Paper invitation delivered and signed for at their home address. October 15th. My husband, Ben, didn't offer empty reassurances when he found me an hour later. He offered something better, evidence. He saw the look on my face, not of sadness but of cold, hard clarity, and he knew. He sat beside me, not speaking, just being a solid presence. Then he said, "I didn't want to add to your stress before the wedding, but there's something you should know." He told me about the engagement party. He described how he'd seen my parents huddled in a corner that night, not celebrating, but on the phone with a sobbing Stella. He'd overheard snippets of the conversation through the din of the party. Words like, "This wasn't the plan. She wasn't supposed to get married first." And the most damning of all, "Don't worry, darling, we'll handle it," clicked into place. My wedding wasn't an event they missed. It was a crisis they had actively handled. The business trip to Dubai my aunt mentioned wasn't a lie they invented after the fact. It was their alibi, planned months in advance. Revenge, I decided in that moment, wasn't going to be a screaming match. It was going to be a database. It was going to be a report. It was going to be my work, the one area of my life where I was always confident, always in control. I bought a domain name that night. It was my own name, simple, private. I stayed up until 3 a.m., fueled by coffee and a righteous, chilling calm. I designed the website with a clean, minimalist interface. There was no emotional language, no accusations, no diary entries. Just a single page titled A Timeline of Events. And on it I built my case. A chronological, undeniable presentation of facts. Each screenshot of a text message, each time-stamped email receipt, each scanned delivery confirmation, was a digital brick in the wall of their lies. It was the most heartbreaking and most empowering thing I had ever built. But here's the final twist. The goal of the website wasn't even to show it to anyone, not yet. The primary goal was to prove the truth irrefutably to myself. To forge an anchor in reality so strong that their psychological warfare could never again make me doubt my own sanity. They had spent a lifetime trying to make me feel small and insignificant. But they had forgotten one crucial thing: they had raised a data analyst. And I was about to present them with a report on their behavior they would never be able to dispute. For months my website, my timeline of truth, sat dormant. It was my private anchor, my secret shield against the swirling currents of my family's narrative. I didn't look at it, but I drew strength from knowing it was there, a silent digital testament to my sanity. I never intended to use it as a weapon. I thought, perhaps naively, that its very existence was enough. But then my parents, in their boundless arrogance, handed me the ammunition, the target, and pushed the launch button themselves. News of Stella's engagement broke, not through a call to me, her sister, but through an explosion of coordinated posts in the family group chat. My phone buzzed incessantly with photos of a massive diamond ring, followed by my mother's giddy announcements. They had secured a famous, exclusive vineyard in Napa Valley for the venue, a place with a 2-year waiting list. A couture gown was being flown in from a designer in Paris. It was to be the wedding of the century, a public spectacle designed to wash away any lingering questions about their dedication as parents. The questions started as a trickle, then became a quiet stream. My cousin Sarah called first. "Clara, are you okay? I mean, I'm happy for Stella, but wow, your mom is planning something rather extravagant. It just seems so different from your lovely, intimate garden ceremony." Her voice was laced with an unspoken question. Others followed, aunts, uncles, old family friends. The disparity was too great, the hypocrisy too loud. They were confused. They wanted to understand. And I realized this was the moment. I didn't send them a long, angry email. I didn't weep over the phone. I replied to each of them with the same simple 6-word sentence. "I think this will explain everything." And below it, the link and the password to my website. I felt no malice, no glee. I simply felt like I was balancing an equation. I was providing the missing data. I didn't go to Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house that year. I chose peace. I chose a quiet, warm meal with Ben and his family, where the laughter was real and the love wasn't a performance. I had no idea that back at my childhood home, a war was about to break out over the pumpkin pie. The call came later that night from my Aunt Mary, who had always been the quiet observer of the family. Her voice was trembling. "Clara, you're not going to believe what happened. Your mother, she just exploded." She told me how a naive, distant cousin had innocently asked my mother if she could see my wedding album. And that one question was the spark that ignited the entire powder keg. Mary said my mother stood up, her face twisted with a rage that silenced the room, and launched into a tirade. She accused me of being a jealous, ungrateful child, a saboteur who was trying to poison the family against them because my own small wedding was so insignificant. But then Mary said something unprecedented happened. My Uncle Robert, my father's brother, a man who had avoided conflict his entire life, stood up. He had seen my website. He looked my mother dead in the eye, his voice calm but firm, and said, "Insignificant, Eleanor? Or was it just inconvenient for your narrative? Some of us have seen the timeline. We've seen the proof." Mary said the entire room went utterly still. You could hear a fork drop. My father, in his usual passive way, tried to play peacemaker, stammering about it being a private family matter. But then my cousin David, who's a lawyer, apparently let out a short, sharp laugh. He said, "It stopped being a private matter, Richard, when you publicly humiliated your daughter at her wedding, and then systematically lied about it to everyone in this room. That was it. The dam broke." The room erupted into a flurry of accusations and defenses, old resentments and newfound truths. The perfect family dinner had become a courtroom, and my parents were on trial. The truth, once released, doesn't just knock on the door. It blows the door clean off its hinges. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. The next week, Uncle Robert, whose business partner owned the Napa Valley Vineyard, called my parents to inform them of a sudden, unresolvable scheduling conflict with their venue. The couture dressmaker, an old friend of my mother's, sent a regretful email saying a staffing crisis meant she was fully booked for alterations for the foreseeable future. But the most ironic part? My parents, in a blind panic, started calling every relative to do damage control. And every frantic call they made, every desperate lie they spun to cover the first lie, only confirmed what the website had already proven. They became the architects of their own social ruin, convincing even the neutral parties that they were exactly as manipulative as they seemed. And what was I doing while this storm raged? I was in my backyard with Ben, planting hydrangea bushes. The sun was warm on my back, my hands were covered in soil, and for the first time in years I felt grounded. I felt clean. I watched a fat bumblebee land on a flower, and I saw it all with a new, terrifying clarity. For my entire life, I thought my silence was keeping the peace. But my silence wasn't peace. It was poison. It was the damp, dark soil that allowed their toxicity to grow unchecked, to wrap its roots around everything. By simply stepping back and letting the truth have a little sunlight, the entire rotten structure had finally, blessedly, collapsed under its own weight. After a war, there is a ceasefire. An eerie, ringing quiet settles over the battlefield as both sides retreat to assess their losses. I expected that quiet to last for weeks, maybe months. I had presented my truth, the family had imploded, and I assumed they would be too busy managing their own self-inflicted crisis to think about me. I was wrong. The scorched earth campaign wasn't over. The final soldier of my mother's army, her golden child, had one last desperate, manipulative attack planned. A week after the disastrous Thanksgiving, my phone lit up with a long, perfectly crafted paragraph. It was from Stella. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an angry outburst. It was worse. It was a masterwork of condescending pity. She wrote about how disappointed she was in my immature behavior, how I had broken our parents' hearts by airing private matters so publicly. She spoke of forgiveness and the importance of family, positioning herself as the magnanimous peacemaker, the wise adult trying to fix the mess her volatile older sister had made. Every word was a subtle jab, every sentence a veiled insult wrapped in the language of concern. She ended with, "I know your wedding wasn't what you dreamed of, Clara, but that's no reason to try and destroy mine. Some of us worked hard to build a life worthy of celebrating." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my thumbs itching to type out a furious point-by-point rebuttal of her hypocrisy. The old me would have spent hours crafting the perfect response, dissecting her every word. But the new me, the one forged in the fire of the last few months, just paused. What was the point? Arguing with Stella was like trying to wrestle with smoke. It was a game I could never win because she wrote the rules. So I did something far more powerful than arguing. I didn't block her. I didn't delete the message. I simply read it and archived it. I refused to give her the satisfaction of my energy. A narcissist cannot stand to be ignored. It's like cutting off their oxygen supply. It drives them to madness. And when Stella couldn't get a reaction from me, when her carefully crafted guilt trip failed to land, she escalated. She went after the one person she thought she could influence, the newest member of our family dynamic. She went after my husband. Ben called me on his way home from work and he was laughing. Not a small chuckle, but a deep rolling laugh of pure unadulterated disbelief. He put his phone on speaker. "You have to hear this," he said, still chuckling. And he read her series of texts to me. We listened together to my sister's voice, transcribed into text, as she patronizingly explained to my MBA holding, successful architect husband that family dynamics are complex, and that as the man in her life, he had a responsibility to guide me to see reason before I did irreparable damage. The messages grew more desperate, more transparently manipulative with each send. She tried to bond with him over my supposed sensitivities. She painted herself as the long-suffering sibling just trying to hold things together. And then came the masterpiece, the one that made Ben have to pull the car over because he was laughing so hard. The final text read, "Surely a man of your ambition can see the benefits of staying connected to successful people like myself and my parents. Clara's recent behavior is only hurting her own prospects, and by extension yours. I'm just looking out for your future together." It was all there laid bare. Her transactional view of the world. Her belief that love, family, and loyalty could all be leveraged for social climbing. Her absolute, staggering inability to comprehend a relationship built on anything else. Ben, who had seen through Stella's facade from day one, didn't get angry. He didn't engage in her drama. His response, which he typed out while I listened, was a work of art in cool corporate-style dismissal. He simply wrote back, "Thank you for your concern, Stella. As Clara's husband, my focus is on supporting her happiness, not managing her behavior. I suggest you direct any future family concerns to the relevant parties directly. Have a good evening." It was a digital door slammed shut. Her final sputtering reply was a single bitter line. "I see she's poisoned you against us too. Don't say I didn't warn you." Listening to those texts, I didn't feel the familiar sting of anger or hurt. For the first time when it came to my sister, I felt pity. I realized with startling clarity that she hadn't changed since we were teenagers. She was still the same girl who would try to turn my friends against me when she couldn't bully me directly. All her accolades, her career, her perfect life. It was all a fragile, glittering shell built around a deeply insecure and hollow core. She was a 30-year-old woman still playing by the rules of the high school cafeteria. That night, instead of fighting or feeling anxious over her failed attack, Ben and I opened a bottle of wine and spontaneously booked a weekend trip to the mountains. We sat on our porch, reading her texts out loud again, laughing at the sheer, clumsy audacity of her attempt at a corporate takeover of our marriage. And in that shared laughter, I understood the final lesson of this chapter. True family isn't something you're born into with a shared last name. Something you build. It's a fortress built brick by brick with shared laughter, inside jokes, and unwavering mutual respect. A fortress strong enough to withstand any siege, even one launched by your own blood. The opposite of war isn't victory. It's silence. A profound, echoing silence where all the drama used to be. For the first time in my life, my phone doesn't ring with my mother's demands or my sister's passive aggression. The family group chat is a ghost town. And in this quiet, this vast expanse of newfound peace, I've finally had the space to truly understand what happened. Not just the events, but the meaning behind them. Many people who hear my story call it a tale of satisfying revenge. I understand why. There is a primal part of us that enjoys seeing the scales of justice balanced. But the longer I live with the outcome, the more I realize it was never about revenge at all. That's too small a word for what this journey has been. Revenge is an act of aggression. What I did was an act of clarification. My revenge was nothing more than holding up a mirror. A clean, polished, unadorned mirror of truth. I didn't scream, I didn't accuse, I didn't manipulate. I simply presented the data. The subsequent explosion, the social ruin, the crumbling of their perfect world, I didn't cause that. They did. They shattered their own world by beating their fists against their own reflection. It's a lesson I've come to understand about the nature of karma. Karma isn't some mystical cosmic force that zaps the wicked with bolts of lightning. It's simpler and in many ways more terrifying than that. It is the natural, unavoidable, scientific law of consequence. It is the harvest you are guaranteed to reap from the seeds you have sown. My parents didn't fall because I pushed them. They fell because the ground they had built their entire lives on was made of lies, and lies have no foundation. They were the architects of a house made of cards, and the truth was just a gust of wind. My mother, I now see, spent her entire life as a sculptor, but her chosen material wasn't clay or stone. It was her family's public image. She chipped away at my confidence, sanded down my personality, and tried to mold me into a shape that would fit her grand vision. A vision where Stella was the flawless centerpiece. She was obsessed with creating a monument to perfection. I used to think she did this out of pure malice, a coldness in her soul. Now I see it differently. I see it as a desperate act driven by a deep, gnawing fear. I learned recently through my Aunt Mary that my grandmother was a relentlessly critical woman, a woman who measured love in achievements and social standing. My mother was raised in the same crucible of conditional love that she forced upon me. She wasn't a monster. She was just another broken link in a long chain of inherited pain, passing down the only kind of love she ever knew. A conditional, transactional, and ultimately empty prize. She tried to build a monument, but she built it on the shores of reality, and the tide of truth always comes in. The profound lesson here isn't that she failed. It's that her goal was impossible from the start. Nothing built on illusion can last. Nothing hollow can withstand the pressure of reality. That is the law of impermanence. The more desperately you cling to something that is not real, be it a perfect image, a toxic relationship, or a false sense of control, the more violently it will be ripped from your grasp. So did I win? For a long time after the dust settled, I thought that was the right question to ask. It's not. The concept of winning implies a game, a competition. And to compete, you have to stay on the field. The moment I chose to stop playing their game was the moment I truly won. My most profound moment of victory wasn't when I heard the Vineyard had canceled their booking. It wasn't when I heard their friends were abandoning them. It was a quiet Tuesday morning several months later. I was watering the hydrangea bushes Ben and I had planted, the ones that symbolized our new life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw my mother's name on the screen. And in that instant I felt nothing. Not a spark of anger, not a jolt of fear, not a flicker of hope that she might apologize. Just a neutral empty space. The silence of a chapter truly closed. That was the moment I knew I was free. The ultimate revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It isn't watching them burn. It's reaching a point where their existence, their approval, their very opinions are utterly irrelevant to your peace. It's not about burning bridges. It's about simply walking away from the bridge and realizing you can build a whole new, beautiful world on your own side of the river. A world where you are the architect. If you're listening to this and my story echoes in the quiet corners of your own life, in the strained family dinners and the unspoken resentments, I want to ask you one thing. What bridge are you tirelessly rebuilding all by yourself, hoping one day someone from the other side will finally decide to cross? What perfect image are you exhausting yourself to maintain? Sometimes the most loving act you can perform for yourself is to put down the hammer and nails. You do not need to set their world on fire. You do not need to orchestrate their downfall. Sometimes all you need to do is stop handing them matches and focus on tending to your own garden. The truth has its own light. Just let it shine. If this story resonated with you, I'd be honored if you shared your own thoughts in the comments below. It's in sharing our stories that we realize we are not alone. And if you'd like to hear more about the messy, complicated, and ultimately liberating journey of being human, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you truly for listening.